I kind of wanted to open this up, but I also realized we could open ourselves up to a civil war here in our own classroom. But understand what Merrill's saying and what he's not saying. I think that's the most important thing here. Merrill is not saying, on the one hand, that we should accept all of redaction criticism. Merrill's also not saying that redaction criticism has to necessarily render the process of inspiration null and void. And I agree with both of those things. That doesn't mean you have to agree with it. I'm not at all here to try to impose what I believe on you. But I have no problem with some shaping of the text to take the text and clarify an old place name, or to add a conjunction that brings two narratives into simpler harmony, or updating to later Hebrew syntax what was written in earlier Hebrew syntax. Something, for instance, in the book of Job. You guys that are in Hebrew, and I guess eventually all of you will be in Hebrew, no matter how good you are at reading Hebrew, you can always humble yourself in the book of Job. You can always go to it and find the difficult syntax and the old Hebrew that's reflected in the book of Job. And you go there, and it's an exercise in great humility. And I have no problem with something being updated, something being brought into smoother, later Hebrew. I have no problem with somebody coming to the Pentateuch and saying Moses was the most humble man that ever lived, or Moses died, and this is what happened. That doesn't render the process of inspiration null and void. If it did, if redaction of any kind rendered the process of inspiration null and void, I'm going to build two presuppositions here. Number one, the presupposition that Scripture is inspired, which we all agree with. Number two, that the autographs are inspired, but that subsequent translations and transmission of the text is useful within the church. We don't all have to read directly from the autograph. You cannot do the work of translation without redaction. You can't do it. You can't translate the text without, in some places, clarifying something, in some places using a different word order or structure, or trying to smooth it out or bring the conjunctions together. The only way you could convince me of this otherwise is if you show up in the classroom holding the tablets that God himself carved out with his finger and said, this alone will be my authority. Redaction is something that does happen, but it doesn't render. It's not the fatal nail in the coffin that critics think it is. If we can prove one instance of redaction, then we can lay waste to the authority of the Bible altogether. And I don't believe that's true, because I do think you find places in the text that show evidence of redaction, and it doesn't move me even a little bit in my convictions about the inspiration of the text. And I think Merrill words that well.